Right.
And the trade term in the cable industry was addressable cable boxes, meaning for every subscriber they knew what you were watching, what you were doing, and then they'd be able to send you, right, advertising that was geared specifically to your interests.
Right.
Yeah.
It really depended. I mean, I know Comcast had something called Comcast Spotlight, where you could go into, speaking of granular, you could go into very small neighborhoods that exhibited certain demographic characteristics and run commercial spots only directed at them, at those people.
Exactly. Right.
And other neighborhoods would see other commercials.
Right.
So it's been going on a while, but right now, because of the ability on the internet, and one thing I want to say also, there's a lot of concern about privacy.
Yes.
And a lot of people feel like, they know my address, they know my phone number. They really don't. You're sort of just a number to them.
Right.
They know who you are, but they don't know the color of your hair or your eye color, or anything like that. But they do know that they do track everything that you do.
Right.
Okay. And it's the same thing when you're streaming movies on Netflix or on Amazon Prime. The suggestions for what you may be interested in the future, and this is true with Amazon as well, based on your purchases. They're going to show you they may send you a customized email that has products that they believe that you're going to be interested in based on your past purchases. So if you buy, as I do, I buy my Starbucks whole bean coffee through Amazon. All of a sudden, I'll start getting emails for filters, for French presses, for coffee cup sets, etc.
Part of the aftermarket, right? All of the products related to a product that you've bought that will enhance the use of it or add to it in some other way. So, we're talking about Amazon, which, by the way, I just saw, this is not new news, but I was researching something, and so this came up, that in 2015, and knowing you probably know this already, in 2015, Amazon surpassed Walmart in terms of market capitalization. It's like, it's almost $300 billion in Amazon. And
look, Walmart is closing, I think, a couple of hundred stores this year. Now, they're still going to be opening stores.
And to a large extent, it's by no means hyperbole to say you can attribute a lot of that to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. I'm reading a book right now, and actually I was going to bring it, and then I thought I'll save it for another show because we don't want to get too off track, but I'll just mention it for now. But there's something that, a business concept that was coined by this Harvard Business School professor who's a best-selling author, Clayton Christensen. So he wrote a book in 1997 called The Innovator's Dilemma. But the concept that came out of that, which has gained tremendous currency in the business community, is disruptive innovation. And I was writing a column recently, and I used Amazon as an example. I mean, that is a mega example of disruptive innovation. And it's not all good. It's not a zero-sum game, so to speak. But Amazon has been the cause for a lot of stores closing, a lot of people losing jobs. I mean, you can't get away from that either.
And you remember 20 years ago when, and don't forget, a Walmart had rural roots. ROOTS.
Remember Bentonville, Arkansas.
Yes, but for the most part, they were the prototypical "we're big in small towns" kind of company. And
huge footprint.
And I remember small downtown business districts. The stores in those districts were affected by this giant box, not just big box, but giant box store that might have been a few miles out of town. Everybody started flocking to them. Their parking lots were large and free. There were no meters. There was selection, one-stop shopping. All of those factors over time led to the demise of many of these businesses.
Oh no, absolutely. And there's a study that's been done by this organization. I mentioned it to you just yesterday, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, in an email I sent you. There's something called the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. It's really a fairly aggressive advocacy group that is anti-big box store, and they were publishing a study that was actually commissioned by the American Booksellers Association, because Amazon started off, right, selling books, and they put a lot of book chain. Forget about bookstores; they put book chains out of business, and Borders, and so one of the talk about big data. One of the highlights or top line results of the study is that even though Amazon employs about 130,000 people, in addition to that, this study claims that they've been responsible for as many job losses, meaning they've been responsible for 130,000. So they haven't replaced all the jobs that they have, obsoleted. But anyhow, the point of talking about this is to say, so you have not even necessarily small town retailers. It could be medium-sized city retailers. It's not all small towns, and they also have been, you might say, victimized by online, e-commerce, and so it's even more incumbent on them, more important to their livelihood and their future, that they know where the customers are. Right.
That's right. That's right.
I mean,
and
it's not just about like you were saying at the beginning. We started off talking about big businesses, but there's something that should be demystified, that you can be a small business, right, and compete, even in today's digital world.
Absolutely. If you strike a place for yourself, if you decide, I'm going to occupy this space, and nobody else is going to occupy this space. So essentially, you're saying to the outside world, to your potential customers, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. But again, in identifying customers, I think about if you're in business now and know what your customer base is comprised of, whether it's mothers with children or business people or students or college students or what have you, you may know that already. So the question that you're going to face is, well, how do I reach the people who I know are my customers? In other cases, you have businesses that are starting up that decide in advance, this is the market that I'm going after. This is the hole that I can fill. Now, but then you have, and let's think about the office supply business. We have a Staples. Staples, first of all, put a lot of stationery stores out of business. Selection, price, convenience, etc. There was a time years ago when most towns had a small stationery store where you could buy rubber stamps and Pendaflex folders and things like that. But there's another company that, and I don't know whether they're national or not, they may be more of a regional company in the office products and office supplies business, called W.B. Mason.
But W.B. Mason. Now, very effective marketing campaign.
Very effective marketing, but what W.B. Mason decided is, we're not going after consumers in general or office equipment buyers in general. What they decided is that we are going to target businesses, corporations. So, and they deliver. There are no W.B. Mason stores. They're huge in the office supply business, but you can't walk into a W.B. Mason store. You can see their trucks around town. So there, they decided, we are going to find our place and our success in the corporate market. So,
and by the way, to that point, you know that they're a major sponsor of the Yankees, and they're all over Yankee Stadium. So I assume, based on what you're saying, Bruce, that has to do with the fact of all the corporate boxes that businesses own at Yankee Stadium, and W.B. Mason figures we're going to be exposed to them.
I'll give you another example of finding your customer, so to speak. When I was younger, I've always been a news freak, and I always watched the Sunday morning news programs.
Just one of the reasons I love you, but I'm the same way.
Very much a news freak and a politics freak, but I used to wonder, in watching shows like Meet the Press, Face the Nation, whatever it might be, why were there ads for Northrop Grumman and Cargill and these mega corporations that none of us, you can't, I'm not going to buy a
consumer product.
I'm not going to buy an F-35. I'm not going to buy seeds in quantities, you know. So I always wondered, why are they advertising here? What is the purpose of all of this? And then I realized, talking about finding your customers, these morning news programs were the only place where they could effectively reach all of the political decision makers in Washington, D.C.
Oh, so it's like a lobbying
It's
play.
more like
Right.
lobbying.
Yeah.
So those, you know, those commercials are not aimed at you and me.
Right, right.
Okay.
So so that audience, as you were describing it, is what's known as a highly qualified audience, right?
Right.
People who have a very pointed interest in what
Right.
you're
I
doing.
mean, you want to reach Congress, you want to reach the Senate,
Right.
you want to reach,
Watch Meet the Press, right?
okay? And this applies to state and local governments as well. So they decided to put their money into news programs that they know that the power brokers are watching.
Right. It's obligatory for them to watch it. Yeah.
So, I answered my own question. It sort of came to me, and quite frankly, this was something that I didn't research.
Right.
You know, it's just it's sort of like the light bulb went off one day.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that that's the reason why. But you'll also see, again, finding your customers, a Northrop Grumman, a Celanese, a Monsanto,
And
et
Northrop
cetera.
Grumman gets military contracts,
Right.
Yeah. So.
But you'll also see them in magazines and their websites like Fortune,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Business Week.
And those are what's known, right, as institutional advertising.
Well,
They're reminding people we're here and
right,
this is what we do.
But you know, there's institutional advertising, but most of those advertisers still have a message that they want to share.
Right.
You know, so it's really more than we're here.
Right.
Okay. It's more, you know, they're very often talking about the future.
Yeah.
Okay, and what's going to happen in the future, or what advances they've made technologically or whatever. But they're all there to influence
Right.
the very powerful decision makers
Right.
that can, you know, pull the switch and make a buy of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, but on a smaller scale, you know, how do you identify your customers? Well, you have to first say to yourself, well, are the customers I'm attracting now the customers I want? Are they making my business profitable?
Right.
We found a number of years ago, and there are a number of ways that you can accomplish it. Very often, you have the customers that you want, but you don't have enough of them.
Right,
okay?
exactly, yeah.
Or we dealt with a furniture chain a while back, where their problem wasn't the media that they used to reach their target audience, but rather
The message, right?
the message and the design of
form
their
it
advertising.
took, yeah,
Okay,
right.
so what was happening was this was a chain of furniture stores with very high priced furniture, $12,000 couches, $3,000 coffee tables. They also did interior design work. So what we found is when we looked at their advertising, it was easy for us because we looked at the advertising and go, this is aimed at old people. This
Right.
looks like it's for older people. There was no hipness or sophistication to it, and what surrounded the actual furniture itself in the ads just looked rather hokey.
Right.
And our statement to the people
clients,
that
right.
the client was 30. You want to attract 25 to 35 or 25 to 40-year-olds. You're not going to do it
Right.
with this advertising. They'll never set foot in your store because of the perception they have of your
Right.
store
Right.
as being unhip and unsophisticated.
Right.
So what was interesting in that case is they knew who they wanted to go after. The solution wasn't the media they bought. The solution was
The
branding,
creative, yeah. Right.
the look of their brand and their advertising.
Right.
So what happened was, so they didn't spend any more.
Weren't they were always in the New York Times.
They were
right.
always in the New York Times.
Right.
The only thing they did was they added publications later on like Vogue
Right.
and Elle and Details and things like that because they realized a very sophisticated audience
Right.
read those magazines.
Style magazines, yeah.
You know, lifestyle,
Right.
but high-end lifestyle magazines. But initially, they never changed their media buy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They spent what, $3-4 million a year in the New York Times. They did every Saturday the back page of the first section, and then every Sunday
The magazine section, right?
No, it was not. No, they did the back of the TV magazine at the Times.
Oh, yes.
So they never changed anything.
Right.
And
I remember that.
within 6 months, their business was up 35%, and they were seeing a lot of faces that didn't have gray,
So what you said, right.
gray hair atop it or whatever.
Right.
Younger people.
Right. Maybe
know.
prematurely gray. But
Premature. Yes.
But what you're saying in that example, and that's a very good sort of mini case study, is that the message didn't match the audience.
Right.
That they wanted to reach. They
Right.
wanted that audience, but their message missed the mark.
Right. And so, you've probably heard the word branding before. This was really about branding, okay?
Right.
What do we stand for? Their old image was, we stand for old style, curmudgeonly, I don't know if that's the right word, but
Stuff, and I remember, I mean, I don't know if you don't want to mention their
No,
name.
I don't, I would rather not mention the name, but.
Okay, but, yeah, no, I mean, and of course I know who you're talking about, and yeah, I would say very stuffy. Very stuffy old world.
Right, but poorly designed.
Yeah.
So when furniture and high-end furniture is all about design, then don't make your advertising look like design is not part of our culture.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
Because
yes,
that's the image that comes across, and that's true. When you want to reach, if you want to reach a sophisticated customer, let's say you have a website, and you might be a plastic surgeon,
right.
or have a plastic surgery group, or but your website looks like a do-it-yourself job and it looks very unprofessional.
Right.
Okay. The person with money who can afford $13,000, $15,000 for a facelift is going to look at that site and go, oh, they're not for me.
Right.
So you have to be as sophisticated or unsophisticated as your audience is.
Right.
You can go after an unsophisticated audience.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And it's funny when you talk about an unsophisticated audience. I remember retailers that deliberately had hand-painted signs in their windows with the prices on them.
Right.
Okay. And that it was a decided downscale look.
Right.
But they wanted to attract low-income shoppers.
Right.
So those people were, for whatever reasons, were attracted to that.
Right.
You could create those same stores could have created an image that their intended market would say, oh, that's not for us because it's got to be very expensive.
It's outside their comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
It's outside their comfort zone.
Right.
So in finding your customers.
And again, we should emphasize that as you get into this next, whatever it is you're going to say.
Right.
That what you're describing scales down, meaning it can apply to a modest-sized business in a small town.
When I was younger, I used to, because I've always followed advertising and media from the time I was a kid, I used to know when an ad agency took over an account, so to speak.
Yeah, I know. I did the same thing.
Right, when somebody was running ads, they had been running TV ads, print ads, and then all of a sudden they had a sharp new look.
Yeah.
They just hired an ad agency. But it's not the act of hiring an ad agency. The goal isn't to hire an ad agency.
No,
the goal is to improve your business, and increase your business, and to create an image for yourself. One of the purposes of advertising is to change perceptions and opinions.
Right.
Okay. So if there is a negative, look at what's happening now with SeaWorld. Okay, with the
that's a paradigm shift.
Okay,
Right.
Now here, this outfit, SeaWorld, has withstood now several years of criticism about the treatment of whales in captivity and all of that. Now they're running a national campaign that's all warm and fuzzy.
They're not going to use them anymore.
And they're not using it, phasing them out by So because they were losing business. People were, in protest saying, well, now that I know what they're doing to the lives of these precious animals.
It's not entertaining.
I feel
it's
guilty.
Not entertainment.
I feel guilty about going there. And so they were losing business. So this new campaign is designed specifically to change attitudes and opinions and make people feel comfortable about going to SeaWorld, because in the last few years with all the media coverage
But at one point, did they go into Chapter 11?
I
or
don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know. Sorry.
That I don't know.
Yeah.
But
they've had financial difficulties.
But the point is, they got people feeling warm and fuzzy
Right.
about SeaWorld again, or they're in the process of doing so.
Right.
Because, if a family had a choice and the family was informed, let's say they're down in, I think Tampa, Florida is one of their locations.
And Orlando. Yeah.
No, I think it's,
Okay.
I think it's Tampa.
All right.
I
I don't want to.
You know what it
I
is?
don't want to tamper with that.
Yes,
notion. Okay.
it's in Florida. Okay.
That's a safe bet.
Safe bet. But they're in the process of changing attitudes of so that people who were going on vacation, I feel a little funny about going there now
Right.
because of all the negative press they
Right.
received. So they lost those families. How do we win them back? How do we get the upcoming families to spend their money at SeaWorld?
Which is the SeaWorld example is a prime example of crisis marketing, right? That's really what they're doing.
Right. But it's different than the crisis marketing. Probably the classic crisis marketing story of our generation is Tylenol.
Right? When they had all those bad bottles,
there were pills that were poisoned and somebody
Right.
obviously got into them. They responded to that crisis
Immediately. Right.
Within days. Every bottle
was taken off shelves.
of
Right.
Tylenol was taken off every shelf in every store in the country.
Yeah.
And so, whereas with SeaWorld has withstood several years of criticism without doing anything about it.
Before responding, yeah.
And it got worse and worse and worse.
Right.
So the crisis was, oh my God, we've got a crisis. What do we do about it? And then they kept asking that same question without answering it.
Right.
And then finally, they've addressed it.
Yes, right.
And of course, you're dealing with corporate politics there, and somebody said, no, we can't admit we were wrong, and
Right.
whatever's going on. So that's the situation you're in. They were in. But again, getting back to how you can find your customers, there right now are so many choices that people have. You can advertise on the internet. You can sponsor Little League teams.
Right,
Okay?
yes, right.
I mean,
Yes.
it goes on and on. But you have to say to yourself, how much am I willing to spend in order to attract enough the business that I see as my goal? So, for instance, if I want to increase my business by $500,000 in revenue this year, how am I going to do it?
Right.
And where are my dollars best spent?
Right.
Theoretically, sponsorship of a Little League team, if you're a small business in a local area,
it can make
could make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a relatively low-cost investment,
Right.
as opposed to advertising, doing search advertising on Google or Bing, or doing banner advertising, local newspaper advertising. But then you have to weigh all of that, and you really have to examine, all right, what am I getting back for what I'm putting in, and is it worth it?
Right.
Should I direct my dollars someplace
Right,
else?
and we can, on the next show, we can get into that aspect more in detail, right?
Right.
About how to go about it, what the process is.
You got money to spend. How do I spend it?
How do you spend it, right?
Right.
So, anyhow, that's it for this episode. And so, on behalf of Bruce, this is Bruce saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Main Street Marketing Challenge. Oh, right.